District judges have been very good. They realize that with just the two of us in the Fresno division that our caseload is very difficult, and especially when I cut back. So they've taken a lot of our civil cases, and that's helped out tremendously.
Speaking of cases, I mean, you've had a lot of different cases, criminal and civil. Are there any ones that kind of stick out for you as being either particularly interesting or particularly eventful that weren't significant in other legal ways? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Let me back up for a second. First of all, obviously they're all important to the litigants, and that's something that I learned back in the Justice Court judge days when I was doing traffic tickets and small claims. The one thing that you get reinforced is that when someone comes in to contest a traffic ticket, when they're in court, that's the most important thing in the world. When people come in on small claims cases, that's the most important thing in the world when they're in court. And that really sort of helped to underscore for me how significant it is when we make a decision that it does impact people, and in those kinds of cases, it's immediate sort of thing. But anyway, so that's just a general segue into they're all important. But there are some that sort of stick out for various reasons. Within our division is Yosemite National Park, and that has spawned a lot of litigation. In 1997, January of 1997, before I was appointed, they had a massive flood that just wiped out a lot of the campsites, a lot of the roads, the infrastructure, etc. And so they obviously got funding to rebuild, and there were lawsuits about what they were going to do to rebuild. And so that was in January, and right after I got started, all of a sudden I get handed this case. It's a lawsuit involving Yosemite, and it was significant, obviously, from the perspective, of course, of the litigants, but also people enjoy the national parks. The National Park Service, it was important, and it was important to them because a decision that I make might have some impact overall on other national parks. So that was significant. The one takeaway from that is that all the litigants, regardless of what their positions were, they all loved the park, and they all had a different perspective of how it should be mended, if you will. Another case, and I realize that most of these will wind up at the appellate level, so it's not like I make the final decision, but I do need to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to make the record. I did have a case involving regulations by the state in terms of automobile emissions, and the question of whether or not there was preemption by the federal government. That was a very interesting case of the dynamics of basically the states' rights and the federal preemption powers, et cetera. But it also dealt with, climate, global climate, which obviously was an important issue. There's a lot of litigation on that. And then recently, there was a challenge to the California law relating to purchase of firearms and the 10-day waiting period, and whether or not that was constitutional in general. And that generated, obviously, a lot of interest because there's a lot of passion on the Second Amendment issues. And so that was really a really very interesting case. So, I mean, there are a lot of different interesting cases, but those just off the top of my head are interesting.
In kind of to tie up, so now you're supposed to be on a 50% schedule, whether that really works or not. Are you getting time to do other things outside the law now that you might not have had time to do before? To a certain extent, not a whole lot different. I think the biggest transition for me is that, I was chief judge until I took senior status. And so from 2008 to 2012, I was the chief judge. And our district is so small that, I couldn't really reduce a caseload or anything like that. So that was very hectic. So really that was like a reduced caseload. Just taking that away,
the administrative part. So, I mean, I totally enjoyed being a chief judge, but that was probably a bigger impact than the reduction of the caseload itself, although I'm starting to feel that now that I'm working through some of the cases, or a number of the cases that I had retained. So that's been very helpful, obviously, with the Sacramento judge taking cases and Judge O'Neill, my counterpart in Fresno, taking a full caseload, plus obviously what I've not taken. They've all been very helpful to me. But in terms of my personal things, I will try to do a little bit more. I'm hoping that once we get our new judge in to take my position, that I'll be able to cut, up a little more,
You mentioned you have a son. Do you have more than one child?
No, just the one son.
And is he involved in law at all?
He was never interested in law. Never.
He's in farming now.
Yeah, right. I wish. Yeah. No, he's always been interested in business, and that's what he's in.
Okay.
And so, but we chit-chatted. I mean, he's always been exposed to judges and lawyers his whole life, but he's never been interested, and that's perfectly fine
That's
with
good.
me. You know, you always have to find your own path.
Well, Judge, we're just about done. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that I haven't addressed?
No.
Well, thank you so much. I told you it'd go fast, and hopefully it felt like it went fast for you.
Sure,
So
yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.